Welcome back to the Game Dev Show. My name is Luke Greenaway, and this week I am joined by master artist of games including Max Payne, Manhunt, and The Witness, to visionary director of 12 Minutes, Luis Antonio. Luis, how you doing?
Hey, look, I'm pretty good. That was a pretty hardcore intro.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I mean, it was easy. It was easy. I just literally looked at your profile and all the work you've been doing, and I was like, great. Like, let's just pick out a couple of bits here. But how's things, man?
Good, pretty good. Just been relaxing now that all the buzz and the release stress and polishing and bug fixings have passed, and
Mm,
just thinking about the future, what to do next, and getting some
dude.
vacations.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. Have you got anywhere planned? Any holidays planned yet?
Kind of, but with the pandemic, we're just kind of waiting to see when things chill a bit so we can travel more.
Mm,
Mostly being with the family and not crunching like crazy in the evenings. Just
yeah.
not
It's,
stressing out. Yeah.
yeah, it's important, isn't it? I read a lot, especially in the games industry, but in all industries at the moment, there's a lot of people focusing on like work-life balance, trying to get that life part of that balance back and focusing on enjoying life a bit more. I think obviously the pandemic has really heightened people's awareness of, I think, like the fragility of life. And yeah, man, I think it's very, very important.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree. I mean, I've been working from home for like 5 years. So when the pandemic hit, it didn't really change the routine. We're pretty fortunate that it doesn't change the what I was doing. I just stayed home more.
the games industry is just like evolved, right? It's just almost reacted. But a lot, like you said, a lot of people were actually doing it before the pandemic hit and before everyone had to isolate. And it's interesting to see how well the games industry's kind of coped with that, and how particularly some really big publishers, like in particular Japanese publishers, I think, who are very used to working in studio, and how even they've adapted to actually like a work from home model and a remote model. And speaking to some developers, like, yeah, like you can see that they've had to actually, they might be working with like 4 or 5 different studios across the globe to bring one game together. And I think it's been quite hard for some producers, especially. I
Yeah,
mean,
managing all that must be. I mean, there's the practical side. Like I saw a lot of friends, like when you're doing like mocap and things that
mm,
are physical and need presence, they became really tricky to do. Artists or just developers that require the discipline of being in a studio is what forces them to be, if you're in your pajamas at home, you're going to be on YouTube, and then while the
yeah,
office allows you to have this rhythm. And I
yeah,
know a lot of friends who just, it's incredibly hard for them to stay productive from home. But you're
yeah.
right, then you're more with your family and less commute too.
I think you can see like a distinct difference as well between games that are made without crunch, where crunch is always going to be a thing, but like where crunch hasn't been at the forefront of the last 3 months of development. Like I think indie, there's a lot more natural love there, because indie developers, they have like a concept and like an idea, and then they run with that, and they stay true to that idea and that concept. Whereas I think the greater the scale of the project, the more people are involved, the more expectation there is, the higher the budget. Like you seem to see that love becomes almost like distilled a little bit, I think you can say, diluted, because people
Yeah,
start focusing on time.
I think you're right. I mean, I think the culture is very important. Like when I was working at Rockstar Games, we crunched a lot. Like I
Mm.
crunched for 11 months on Manhunt 2, which was
Jeez.
insane. And I was living in UK, and I had to sign something saying I would not sue them for crunching so much.
Jeez, man.
But
Wow.
there was a lot of passion. Like we were extremely
Mm.
passionate, and I think the game had a lot of love into it. So I think it's studio culture, and I don't know. Like I imagine like people who work on FIFA, every
Mm.
year churning out a football game, updating the stadiums, the uniforms.
You have to have a real passion for the franchise and football to do it
Yeah,
year in, year out. Talking to that passion, right, and like talking about yourself, you actually studied design at the University of Lisbon. What was this like? Because has passion for games, has that always been something you've been interested in, and that's what led you to take in design at university?
yeah, I think so. I mean, when I was studying, there was no game design degrees. There was none of that. There was no thoughts about that at all. Like even the game industry in Portugal was non-existent. There were some people doing mobile stuff, but there were no degrees on those areas. I was crazy about games. I think like my father was a programmer, so when I was very young age, we had a computers at home. So I was on MS DOS trying to to run Prince of Persia and Day of the Tentacle, and trying to
Oh
learn
wow.
to navigate. We never had consoles, so I think because we had a PC and not consoles, I got this. I remember going on Paint, and getting screenshots of Dragon Ball, and then trying to change the color of the hair of the characters. Or there was this desire, I think, from a young age to mess up with data from games, because when you're trying to run a game on DOS, you're even trying to find the right folder. You would stumble on a folder that has images or has sound files, and I'm like, oh, what if I change a sound file? And I think that stayed. And then in university, I knew I wanted to do art, but I had no idea how I would, make a living out of it. And
Mm,
my parents wanted to be an architect, but architecture looked really boring. It was like 90% of my friends who were architects were, you're doing what are you? You're doing like toilet seats or door handles. Like the pleasure of designing a building is very rare. And the communication design seemed that I would learn some things that would allow me to go into games or film or visual effects or something along entertainment. But I didn't learn anything there. I learned how to think and how to problem solve, but in terms of there was no 3D, there was no the teachers barely knew Photoshop or game engines. They had no idea how to use those or anything. So it was all pretty much self-taught on the side, which
mm.
I think it's something in the industry that's very common. Now we have a lot of degrees. At the
Yeah.
time, you just have to learn by yourself.
It's so true. We hear like we've had a lot of guests on who have like a similar journey at the beginning. They'll take like computer science like back then, but it was very different to what it can be now and how, like you said, there's these video game courses and degrees and development, and you even have like academies set up specifically for video game design. What was your family like? What was their reaction like when you were like, well, this is what I want to focus on, this is what I want to get into?
They were super supportive. Early on, I wanted to be an illustrator for many years. And halfway through university, I realized that by the end of university, I needed a portfolio. So I started to work towards having an illustration portfolio. And I started to get some gigs for newspapers and magazines as an illustrator semi regularly, which was pretty funny. The newspaper illustrations are, I don't know if you know this, but you're drawing the things that cannot be photographed, like let's say a
Mm.
pedophile ring somewhere in Portugal and they don't have photos. You'd get these commissions like at midnight to get something for 6 a.m. about a bank robbery or a guy who stabbed his wife and ran away, and you have to draw the what happened. But I
Jeez.
started to make enough money to realize I could make a living out of this. So my
Mm,
parents, just to go back, my parents were just, you have this skill set, go ahead and try to do this thing. We don't quite know where it's gonna go, but it seems
mm.
you'll survive anyway. So they were cool. The hardest for them was leaving the country. As soon as I finished university, I moved to London to work in games, and that was
Yeah.
confusing at the time. That it was like, well, the idea of moving abroad was pretty funny.
Yeah. But that first role, that was quite a big one because that was a Rockstar, is that right? Your first role in the industry?
Yeah, that was pretty funny. I first I tried to apply. I don't think I ever mentioned this. I really wanted to work in film, so I started to apply to VFX companies. All in London, there's like in Soho, like there's a ton of them there. But I realized slowly that the work in VFX, you end up being very focused on something. You're going to be doing like if you're working on King Kong, you're going to be doing maybe fur for 2 years or metal textures. While
Mm.
games, it's much more broad in terms of each project, you do a ton of things. So I slowly started to look for work in games, but no one was really hiring for juniors. But Rockstar in London, they had opened a studio and they were looking for art directors. So I applied for art director, and yeah, and they replied. They said, "Look, you have zero experience, but we're going to be open for juniors in a few months. So and you look like a junior candidate." And that was
Mm.
it. So I flew there, and
That's really cool. You worked on Manhunt too while you were there, didn't you? And I actually read somewhere on Manhunt too that you were a porn actor. Is that
I
what?
was.
Could you tell us about this?
Yeah, that's a good story. I became good friends with a sound designer, and he was mixing all the sounds. And there's a level. There's a porn theater. I was doing art for the game, right? My role, I did like I don't know, like 5, 6 levels, maybe 30 characters. And the sound designer, there's a level which is in a theater, like a porn theater, and there's a movie playing in the background. And my accent at the time was very. He had a strong. I think still has a little bit. Now maybe it's more French, but my English accent had a very strong Portuguese
Mm.
accent on top, and he found it really funny. So he's like, "Dude, let's go to the booth and record you doing some naughty, porn lines. And that's it. We did like a 2 hour session, which was hilarious. And it ended up in the game, and I ended up credited as a. So I could choose my porn actor name,
Jeez.
and
What
now
did
I
what
think
were you
it's
called?
Stallion or Black Stallion or something. I'm still on IMDb
Oh.
credited as an actor. Yeah, it's a porn. I think it says there. Let me look. Actor. Yeah, Luis Stallion Antonio. Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I love that. I love that you just rolled with it as well. You're like, yeah, porn actor. Yeah, I can do it. I can do anything. Like, you know?
Oh yeah, it was super fun. Like I think it opened up. I don't know if you know, but most Rockstar studios they acquire existing studios. Like the Midtown Madness guys. I don't know if you know the Microsoft game. They're the
Mm,
ones who became the Midnight Club studio.
mm,
So Rockstar would look for a very strong studio and would convert them into Rockstar. But the London studio was a brand new. They get people from all over the world. It was the first studio they had created. It didn't exist before. So the team, we were all very tight. We were all new in there. We were all getting to know each other. And there was a lot of overlap in, the artists would jump into the designer, seeing what they're up to, the sound designer, right? Everyone would, the animators, we would just goof around a lot, which I
mm.
think allowed for a lot of overlap between, versus a studio that's already very
Yeah.
defined.
They were more open to more ideas. Like it was a bit more like horizontal in terms of the approach to development and like artistic input.
I think a little bit. Like I remember very when we were doing the animations for Manhunt 2, the lead animator, CJ, he wanted to record new animations, and he was so talented that he came up with a mocap studio in the office. This was ages ago. He set up a corner for mocap, and then he plugged in the mocap studio straight to the game engine. And then we were all goofing around doing kill animations because you could
Yeah.
you'd go into the spaces like okay, and I know if you know Manhunt, it was right. You have to kill a guy with I don't know with a baseball bat 30 different ways, and after a while it just gets like, what can we come up with?
Yeah.
And he would be next to you jumping, and sometimes hey, come here guys, let's just try some crazy stuff. So there was a lot of that, I think.
Did
Really
you
strange.
did you enjoy it at Rockstar? Like, how was it? I mean, you mentioned like crunch earlier, but how was your overall experience? Because it's your first role in the games industry, and I guess like you would have learned a lot throughout that period.
Yeah, at the start, my biggest shock was the amount of talent each person needs to have, the amount of skills, right? Like as an artist, you're doing textures in Photoshop, you're modeling in Studio Max, you're importing things to the game engine, you're trying to figure out all these technical things, from, like at the time, for example, we were, without being too technical, there was no lighting in the engine. So we were baking
Mm,
vertex colors in geometry using Mental Ray in Studio Max and then baking them in geometry so it would look like the lighting was in the engine. And you're coming up with these solutions with like there's an artist, there's a technical artist, and there's the programmer writing the code, trying to match. I was overwhelmed by the complexity of doing a game.
mm.
Well, as a designer, which was I was studying, maybe you're doing a label for a yogurt, and what you're doing, you're in Photoshop, choosing where the yogurt goes, where the colors are, and then it goes and it's printed in a paper. So there was this fascination for the complexity, which makes me understand crunch in a way because there's so many variables you cannot control, and you come up
Mm.
with things, and then when you're playing them, you realize we need like 6 more months, and we only planned 2 months. The crunch was
Yeah.
was was hard, but it was a lot of lessons there. I realized how important it is to have a personal life
Yeah.
and how to stand up because a lot of people in the industry they would accept the crunch because so many people wanted to work in games. You just get fired and there's an army of people who will happily replace you. But if you think about it, crunch means the producer is not good at his job, right? He didn't schedule properly. Depends on the crunch. If it's a 1 month crunch, like on The Witness, we crunched because we got a slot at PSX, the event, to show the game on the stage. And we're like, yeah, man, we can have a demo and you can have a trailer. We literally we figured out the camera path and we
Mm.
worked on the art just for the camera. And that was like an intense month to make it look good for the first reveal trailer, which makes sense. Like everyone was really passionate because
Yeah.
this will boost the game and the sales. But at Rockstar, it was more of the producer did not know how to manage a schedule. And instead of protecting his team, he'd rather protect, the stockholders or whoever
Mm.
is paying his salary by making everyone below him work like crazy.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say we stood up to it. Like after Manhunt 2, which is where we crunched, the whole studio said, "Look, You make us crunch again, we all leave. And
Mm.
we didn't crunch again at that
That's
studio.
brilliant. It's
Beautiful.
tough to do that though. Like you gotta have some serious courage, right? Because it does feel like with the games industry, even now, this is still applicable. There is so many people want to work in it. You speak to like people at all different levels, but there can be this feeling of imposter syndrome sometimes, especially when you're working. I know, and this is applicable to all industries and all loads of different roles, but within the games industry, it does feel like, okay, if you're working on a great project and you're working at a big publisher, there is a concern that am I ever going to be able to do that again? And I think it takes a
Yeah,
lot of courage to stand up to that.
I agree. And I mean, this was like, I think after 8, 9 months of crunching, like I lost my girlfriend
Wow.
because she was like, you're never home. I got pale, I lost a lot of weight. There were clear signs of, wait a second, no matter, this is just wrong. And because we had no weekends, right, we would work 9 to 11 or something every day for like 10 months.
Wow.
You could see that you're shifting as a person into
Mm.
what life is because you don't see friends, you don't go out, and you're not productive either. Like you start to question the crunch because you just are not productive. Your brain stops. You cannot, right? So the questions raise of, even if I want to be a team player and I really
Mm.
want to get this game done and I love the studio, I think we're not doing the best way to arrive at that conclusion, right? You start to realize that, okay, I understand you want to get the game done, but you're just doing it incorrectly. There's other ways to do this.
Did that lead because you obviously you left Rockstar and you went on to Ubisoft. Was crunch like part of the reason for leaving? Like, tell us about that move.
No, crunch was not like, so we crunch on Manhunt too, and like I said, we after that the whole studio we're like, we're not doing this anymore, and we're also more, because we were so tight, we were really like, to the producer, like we would question his decisions. Like on the next project was Midnight Club LA for the PlayStation Portable, and we had a year left for the game. And then he would come back from meeting with Sam and Dan Houser, in New York, and he would tell us, look, we're going to do Paris, we're going to add Paris to the game. And we had these all studio meetings, and we were like, dude, we don't have time to put Paris in the game, so we're not putting Paris in the game. And we'd be like, like we're not doing. We all, right? The programmers would say we don't have time to do this. The artists would say it's taking us X amount of time, and we would cut features. Yeah, we would monitor ourselves. So crunching kind of disappeared, and we felt empowered. Like the reason for moving was I just wanted to try another studio. Like I could see myself staying at Rockstar for 10 years, but I was like, how does it work in other studios? How it is other cultures? And I loved traveling. So it was in Canada, where I'm now. It was in Quebec. It was a lead position, which I had never been a lead before.
Mm.
And it was a different project. And I wanted to see how Ubisoft was to work for.
Mm.
And
How
Ubisoft,
was it?
so Ubisoft pays overtime.
Okay, that's a good
Yeah,
start.
they would pay, I think, salary and a half or something like that. And after a while, they would start giving vacation days if they ran out of budget for overtime. And what would that do would be like, I think like the second project I worked on, we did like 3 months overtime, and we were loving it. We were like, yeah, because we would have like 6 months vacations after this. But what happened was, right, because the studio is accountable, the heads of the studio would go to the producer and say, look, you're burning through the whole budget because we're paying all these people for overtime. This is not
Mm.
feasible. We'll run out of money without the game being done. So that would put the fire under the producer to try to cut features or manage the project better, which was great. But Canada is a different culture. If it was like, let's say at 5 you stop working, if you're in the office at 5:30, which I would be, I had this rockstar mentality, and I was a leader, so I would stay an hour or two after the time was up, and people would come to me to be like, do you have problems at home? Is everything okay with you? Like, why don't you go enjoy the rest of your day?
Oh, man.
But the games, I mean, I think it's different. Like in Quebec, especially, it was more of a job. It was their 9 to 5 job
Mm.
versus this crazy, passionate, let's try to break boundaries and make revolutionary games. They were more come to the work, do their thing. Like, and I remember I would push a lot the junior artists to come out of their comfort zone. There was a project we
Mm.
were working on, and there was an environment artist, and she had to design a sound stage. Like it was like a talk show or something. She had to design the stage, and we didn't have a concept artist. And I was like, look, why don't you try to concept some stuff? And she felt super out of her comfort zone, but because she was used to just getting a concept piece and then model it. And I realized, yeah, that was a big lesson that some people, they don't like to be challenged. They're good at something and they want to stay at it. But I like a lot more the challenge of getting off my boundaries, and that's why I ended up leaving Ubisoft.
I saw that you were a lead, and then you were an art director for 4 months before moving on. Like, what? That's a short period of time, obviously. And was there any particular reason? Because it sounds
Um,
like you got the role you wanted way
yeah,
back when you
there
applied at
was a
Rockstar.
yeah. It's pretty funny. So as a lead artist, right, I started to take more and more art director roles. Like for people who don't know, like a lead artist, you'll manage the artists based on the art direction, right? So if you have a certain
Mm.
art style to follow or something, you will be figuring out the pipeline, figuring out the technical challenge with the technical artist. And as an art director, you're in charge of the whole thing. But what that meant was that I was in direct meetings with friends and the heads deciding what the next projects would be and the direction of the project we were doing. So I could really see the thought process of the studio, which was ridiculous. It was all based in making money, to the
Oh.
point that I remember we were doing a game for Kinect long before Kinect was out, right? And we had some amazing programmers who were solving really complex things. Like I don't know if you remember, the Kinect had an issue where if you rotated, it would know if a leg was forward or backward, right? Kinect
Mm.
would expect the body. I don't know if you know what Kinect is, right?
Yeah, I
For that,
remember Connect.
like it
Yeah,
would read
yeah.
your
It was
body and your body motion,
doomed. Yeah.
and we were doing some really cool stuff. But then the higher ups would be like, look, this game just came out for Wii and it sold a lot, so I want you guys to stop the Kinect development, but you're going to use the same assets you created to make a Wii game that's going to be just like this one, so it makes more money. And you're like, wait, what about not? So there are a lot of these decisions in big studios,
Mm.
and I was like, no, I'm never
Yeah.
going to do anything that's creatively. But I understand that I'm not criticizing. I think if you have a studio of like 300 people or 1,000 people, you have to feed these people, you have to plan ahead, and I imagine it's hard to move. Right, it's like a dinosaur. It takes time to turn, and Ubisoft did it in Montpellier. They opened, from dust. Eric Shai. They made a lot of effort to get indie ideas and more creative
Mm.
things going. But at the time, it was pretty stuck, and I just wanted to do something else.
Yeah, because you when you left there, and obviously you went to an indie studio, which was Thekla.
Yeah,
Am I
yeah.
pronouncing
Wow,
that
you did your
correctly?
research, man.
But you were
Not
there.
many
You were there
people
for
know
4 years, right? And you worked on The
the witness.
Witness. And this is a huge shift from Ubi and Rockstar because it's a much, 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 much smaller team. So I understand obviously the rationale to move into a smaller team, to obviously be working on games for the sake of games rather than money. And it's more agile. There's that agility. There's probably the heart and the passion is there at big studios, but I think at smaller studios it's less about logistics and more about creativity, you could
You
say.
nailed it exactly. Yeah.
What are the unique challenges though of like shifting from a big AAA publisher to essentially an indie as an artist?
So the motivators, you got it. It was totally that. At Ubisoft, I would have first. There's a ton of meetings, and half the meetings would be about the engine is broken, or or this asset is not exporting correctly, right? Versus gameplay and design and actual
Mm.
game things you're trying to solve. Originally, I was not going to work on The Witness. The plan was to work on Spy Party with Chris Hacker. I don't know if you know that game. I had been following Inis for a few years, even before Ubisoft, and he was working on this game called Spy Party, which is I was fascinated by this game. It's a game where one player is a spy and the other player wants to kill the spy. So one player is in a party and he has to, like steal a microfilm, put drugs on a drink or something. And then the other one is
Mm.
outside looking at this party of 10, 15 people and he has to figure out which one of these characters is not an NPC, but it's someone pretending to be an NPC. And you
That
have one
sounds
bullet
wicked.
with him. It's really cool.
That's so cool.
It's very hardcore, like poker style, right? There's one player pretending to be an NPC and behaving like an NPC, and there's another one analyzing every single player to see which one is the fake one. And you have like 10 minutes. It's a pretty cool game. But the art was non-existent. So I was a bit bored at Ubisoft, so I started to do characters for him in ZBrush. And I was sending him these characters, like, hey, look, you don't know me, I like your game. I was imagining your characters could look like this. And so we started to chat back and forth and he started, like telling, oh yeah, one character should look like this and like that. And so we started to kind of work together a little bit until eventually I told him, look, I'm leaving Ubisoft. I'm tired of being here. If you want to work with me, now it's the time. And he said, look, I'm not ready yet. I'm still doing a lot of programming stuff. But my friend Jonathan Blow is about to finish The Witness and he needs someone to just wrap up. Like, so you could work for him for 6 months, and then you come work on Spy Party. So I flew to California to work for a few months on The Witness. But once I sat down to play The Witness and work on it, I started to question a lot of the art, like, I don't know if you've seen the old screenshots of the game, they were a bit all over the place. I had this very critical eye of, how is the world supposed to look like? How are things supposed to look like? So we started to go down this rabbit hole of how is the game really supposed to look like? And Jonathan had a very clear direction in terms of being a game with no noise. He never figured out what no noise means visually. Like, he was able to identify when it's not working, but how to fix it, we didn't quite know. So the art team, we just sat down and we started this process. And yeah, it took 3 years to finish the game. So I never worked on Spy Party.
Jeez.
That was
That's
it.
great.
And in terms of working with Jonathan, the main difference was is what you said. It was all about, first, there were no schedules, there's no roles, there's nothing. It's just you're there and you use your skill set to make this project be done. So like, I did the trailers, I did the website for the game, and then the art, right? We were 3 artists working on the island. We were just figuring out how to get things done, which was amazing. It was, and Jonathan was not afraid to do drastic changes in order to, like, we had the island all complete, and one day he was like, guys, I think it's taking too long to walk between locations. We need to shrink the island. And we're like, what? Shrinking the island? We're gonna have to cut stuff, glue things, it's gonna be months. And he's like, but don't you think the game will be better? And you're like, yeah. Then why would you not do this?
That's brilliant.
It's amazing. So it was like, yeah, it's done when it's done. But the choices are all towards making an amazing experience. And that was amazing. It was every question you make, where I put a tree, what color do I choose, was all towards, does this serve the themes and the purpose of the project? And that's what I've been wanting to do for years. And now I'm working with this guy who just wants to do that. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Like, obviously such a success, right? Like, for a title that's relatively abstract in some ways, like compared to like a lot of like current or titles that launched at that time, it was a huge success. Do you have like, because obviously you've always worked on different projects, do you have like a particular genre or specific type of game that you enjoy working on the most? Or is it more about the creative process of that project?
It's a tricky question. Like, as an artist, I think I had preferences. For example, like when I work on Midnight Club, it was a bit boring because you're designing tracks to race on, and we were like, I remember spending, like, we had to do license plates for the cars. So I spent like 2 months or something doing all the states' license plates, which is like pretty boring. Versus like on Manhunt, we would be figuring out, like, I remember like level 2 or level 3, you come back to your home and your house burned, and we wanted to create a horror feeling. We would spend like 2 weeks watching horror movies, then understanding how horror movies work. How could we convey some of the color palette changes and the sound design and the way you turn to get scared, right? There was this creative process versus, license plates and doing tires for, right? It's really cool as a player to change your tires and, to pimp your car. But as an artist, you're doing, I don't know, 50 hoods, 50 rims, 100 whatever. It's
does it not leave much space for creativity, because it's kind of like you need to create 50 different types of this object compared to Manhunt? It sounds like it's far more about, this is what we want the player to feel, this is what we want to show.
Exactly. And the car and all the cars were licensed, so the cars would be sent to the companies. They would have to be approved by the companies. They'd be like, oh, your spoiler is 2 millimeters too long and the silhouette of the whatever. So it was it's almost like a factory thing. So I think as an artist, I would prefer projects that were had these creative challenges. Like at Ubisoft, I work on a fighting game, right? It's all about what you see with the 2 players fighting. And it was a great challenge because it was like almost like a set design, like a theater play, versus a third person game like Manhunt or Max Payne. So these refreshing new challenges as an artist was what was driving me. But on The Witness, design became the biggest driver, right? Suddenly, there was this comfort in discarding your art art was just there to serve a higher purpose of game design, which was already doing it in other projects, but here it was to a level that I had never experienced,
Mm.
which made me want to work on games that would challenge, right, that perception of, right, if you want to convey sadness, how do you make all your art go towards sadness? And even the way you move or even the way you interact with the UI, right? Every single element, how do you make that element go towards a specific feeling or experience, which
Mm.
is so abstract, right? It looks abstract until you break it down into its elements. If I want to explore a concept, which like with 12 minutes, it was, right, this repetition and accumulated knowledge. How can I do that with all these tools we have as game designers and artists? And I think that's my addiction now is just exploring something and taking all these elements to explore it and see what
Yeah.
happens, because you don't know what's going to happen. I think that's what I like in games. You, like in a film, you have a script, you do your storyboarding, and you pretty
Mm.
much have a kind of, I mean, they say the movie gets done a couple of times, right? In the script staging, when you're shooting it and then you edit it, but you have a kind of a direction you're going to go towards. While in games, until you're actually playing it, things drastically change and
Mm.
you don't know what's happening, kind of, I think, as you're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, tell us about 12 minutes and that, I suppose, what led to its creation.
So the start of 12 minutes, if I go to the beginning, we were at Rockstar, we had finished Manhunt 2, and we got a green light from New York to say, you can do whatever game you want to do. It's very rare, you know? And so our producer was like, okay, guys, who wants to pitch in ideas? And I had been toying a lot with concept of using time for gameplay, like whether it's like I had an idea for like a soccer game or whatever. A game, imagine a soccer game where the game lasts 5 minutes and you can go back in time as you play the game, so you can loop over. I mean, Lemnin's Gate or something just came out like a few months ago and does that concept exactly, or as a shooter where you can loop
Mm.
back. So I was playing with these ideas, and I had an idea Groundhog Day style, and I pitched it, and I was like, we have the GTA 4 engine from Scotland, which in Edinburgh, where they're doing the GTA, so we could use that engine, simulate a full city, do a crazy time loop game. Like, no, too complicated. But it stayed in my head as an idea. But I always assumed that to do your own game, you need to, right. Remember, at this time there was no Unity yet, so it was, you need someone to
Mm.
write the game engine, which had no idea how to do. You need all this effort. There wasn't Steam was just starting, so you'd have to all the distribution. I didn't think that I could do my own game, right? I would need to
Mm.
have an idea and have a team do that idea. And that stayed at Ubisoft. I got some friends to work on the free time, but it was like any programmer that I would convince to work on this idea I had of a time loop. They would, like, one of them was like, "Oh, I'm writing a game engine." I'm like, "Great, so let's use your engine. Yeah, let's do that. I'm doing the lighting system. I think in a year I might have something." I'm like, "What?" Then we started using Unity, but programmers would be excited about some Unity feature versus
Mm.
working on this game design. So I kind of put this on the side until, while at Tekla, first when I would bounce these game design ideas I had, people would actually talk about them. They'd be like, "Oh, how are we going to solve this? How are you going to do this?" Which got me excited. Then seeing like the pipeline on big studios, if you have a design idea as a game designer, the game designers don't program, which is pretty weird. It's like a painter who doesn't draw, but hires someone to draw for him and says it's his
Mm.
painting. So you'd have a designer with idea, he would write a document. The document will go in a meeting, you get a programmer assigned, the programmer writes the code for the idea, the designer plays the idea, then it refines this document based on what it's ridiculous. You have this long-winded, so the iteration process is very slow. While at Tekla, Jonathan would have an idea, he would go into a room, and an hour later, he would show us a playable version of what he said an hour ago and be like, "What?" And
That's
some
so
ideas
cool.
were amazing. Like, I don't know if did you play The Witness?
No, I didn't,
Yeah,
like,
The
to be
Witness. It's
honest.
really so you trace those line puzzles
Mm.
on the screen, and then at the end of the game you have this tower, and it's going to be a spoiler, but it's okay, I think, where you're tracing on a puzzle, but it's building geometry in real time that matches the puzzle, doing bridges that you can walk on.
Mm.
And I remember Jonathan telling us he had this idea of making a physical version of the puzzle appear. And you're like, "Yeah, that sounds cool." And yeah, this was the one where he went and he came back. This was, I think it was overnight. The next morning, he was like, "Guys, come see this," right? And And there he was drawing a puzzle line, and the world was building the shapes. And I was like, yeah, that's the power of knowing how to program to
Yeah.
develop your idea. And then there was like other designers who, like I said, like this studio was very informal. Like other friends of Jonathan and designers would come over and they would stay maybe a week and they would work at the studio. So you would see them develop their ideas. And lunchtime, you go hang out with them and they're showing you what they're designing. And you see it demystified this process of creating games, which made me, damn, I'm going to learn how to program. So I
Yeah.
slowly started to learn how to program while working on The Witness. So I could try to do the same thing they were doing, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
That's brilliant.
and that was it. It was a very casual, let's see where this goes kind of
Mm.
process. But as this grew, people were like, look, that looks pretty solid, man. You should maybe do a game out of that. And then I went to PAX East in 2015 where I was like, okay, let's see if it's true. So I brought the
Mm.
prototype to an event. Let's see if people play it. And
Mm.
people played it. They loved it. And then that's when I was like, once The Witness is done, I think I could get funding and work on this as a game.
Yeah. It comes back to you like, you always wanted to push your boundaries, right? You gave that example of a young lady you worked with in art and speaking to her about doing concept art, and she didn't want to come out of her area of expertise, I guess. And talking about like, her doing some concept design for that stage piece. And she wasn't comfortable coming out there, but you always like to push yourself into kind of breaking those boundaries that are within your role. And it is fascinating because you don't often hear, you never really hear of like artists who then go on to like design and develop their own games. And I think that develop part is the key. And it is very interesting that often game designers, they're not
Art.
programmers. Yeah,
Yeah.
or they
Yeah,
don't do
Lucas
art.
Pope is
Like,
the only one I know that Papers, Please, Oberdin.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
Papers, Please is great.
so he does
But yeah,
everything. He does art, music, design.
because having great ideas is fantastic, but often great ideas never see the light of day because you can't present them in the way that people relate to and they understand the value of.
So this was also a slow learning process. Like after Rockstar, actually, something that they do in UK that I really loved was that there's this that Portugal didn't have at a time, and it surprised me. There's this clear effort of personal development. Like I remember I was at Rockstar and I wanted to learn ZBrush, which is like a sculpting program for artists, and they bought licenses for ZBrush and they got me courses for it. There was this effort of, if you want to learn, we'll be here to let you learn. And even initiatives like I started life drawing inside the studio. There was another guy who loved arcade machines, and like there was this effort to let you grow personally. So when I moved to Ubisoft, I pushed for this. So they took me to SIGGRAPH. I went to MIGS. I wanted to go to conferences, and I started to allow me to meet other developers. So when I get eventually to California, we're going to GDC every year. And I started to see like that there's something I just realized I didn't mention, where people who go straight to indies, at least from what I've seen, there's this like AAA has a very strong, solid structure on how to make a game. The pipelines are very clear. The version control, how you store your data, how you name your files, how you do your builds, almost like it's very streamlined. While indies are a bit all over the place. Like, for example, I remember on The Witness, there was no map of the island. It was my first thing. Where's the map of the island? We need names for the areas, right? We need to say the quarry, and I love this kind of structure. And this structure also applies on how you sell your game or how you promote your game or how you even build it. And a lot of indies that I met as I went into the indie world, there were these things of they have a great pitch, but somehow they don't get funding, or they manage to make a great game, but they didn't budget for marketing, so no one knows about the game. Or they forgot they have to do QA and play testing, right? There's these gaps of knowledge that I was lucky enough to get from my experience in AAA, where you see the whole process over and over, very tightly built. So for 12 minutes, I had almost a hate towards, game design documents. Like, I think that doesn't make any sense. It's too vague, because once you do a game, once the game exists as a playable thing, you will learn so much about your idea that a game design document cannot cover. And the worst thing you can do is look for funding and get funding based on an idea. And then when you execute it, you realize you need 5 more years or 10 more people or a lot more money. So my goal for 12 minutes was, I'm only going to get funding once I have such a momentum that there's not a real issue about getting funding. It's about who do I want to fund my project. So what I did was by PAX East, I had already gone to, yeah, I did a PAX East. So I had journalists writing about the game, how interesting it was. So I had the media already saying that this game has potential. And everyone who I approach, I would just give them a prototype. There was no conversation. I was like, play it.
Mm,
I would sit down with them. They would play for 45 minutes. They would play for as long as they wanted, right? You can measure the quality of a game based how long someone disengages, right? So
mm.
by this point, people would play for 45 to an hour. And I'll be like, so what do you think? And they would be like, yeah, this looks amazing. So the conversations were a lot more about how much money I need and are you going to give me all the creative freedom I want to do this? Because a lot of publishers are all about, we want to make a deal with this platform or whatever, or we want
Yeah.
to not go in this direction because it might offend some people, or this is too serious, or there was none of that. So well, yeah, so I ended up signing with Microsoft, and they were just like, here's some money, do whatever you want.
I've spoken to a couple of devs actually about this, but like Microsoft are just very much, they really don't get in the way of creativity. And I think that's quite a hard thing to do. I think like it's underestimate how hard it is to invest in something and not have a say in that creative process. Because I think naturally as people, you want to have a bit more involvement and
Yeah.
like try and refine something based on your perspective.
No, you're right, and I think they play the long game, right? They're planting
Mm,
these seeds that they hope in 3, 4, 5 years will arrive somewhere, which is amazing. There's also like, right, I had a prototype, right, but I also would show who the team would be, right? There was this understanding of the whole pipeline, right? Who's gonna make the version for Xbox? Do you have QA? Do you have marketing in mind? Right? I think they understand. They
mm.
look at all process and see, do you know what you're doing besides having a working prototype? And I hope they do that with other games.
I'm sure they do. Like, do you have a particular takeaway from your experience with 12 minutes? Like, if you would say, like, summarize what you've taken away from the whole experience thus far, what would it be?
I've got a ton of them, but I think the biggest one of all is to be comfortable not knowing what you're doing. You know, like as a lead artist, I had this mindset of I need to have all the answers and lead this team. I need to know what we're doing. But then I learned that actually a good lead is someone who is very comfortable having no idea what's being done, but getting the right people to find the answers, and being there to support them. And 12 minutes, and even the witness, right? It was this constant, we have this challenge we want to solve. We have no idea how we're going to do it. But
Mm,
instead of panicking, we're really comfortable being in the uncomfortable zone. And I think that's where the boundaries get pushed. I remember early on, we are trying to figure out the art direction, the visual style for the witness, which I think is pretty unique.
yeah.
And there was this constant fear of, oh, we know how to do this, so let's go in this direction, versus let's figure out how we want the game to look, and then we try to find out if you can actually pull it off, which I think allowed the game to have a visual style that was unique. Which, right, it literally means that we would do a concept piece of how a tree is supposed to look, and then we go to the graphics program and like, how do we pull this off? And they have no idea, so they're writing shaders. We're trying to build geometry. This is what I think makes games stand out, is being in this
Mm,
zone. And 12 minutes, being the director of the thing, was this constant failing. It's failing for 5 years until you get at something, but being
yeah.
happy at it instead of that is the biggest lesson. Like, you have no idea, like, you run off budget, people leave the project, you're not managing to get some things done, things are falling apart, but there's progress. There's a clear progress that I don't think you see it if you're too panicking or too stressed out. I think I learned the hard, like, as an artist. Like, I remember very well in Manhunt, my first job as a 3D artist was to do a bloody hand texture on the wall. Right, there was a guy who was bleeding and he was putting his hands as he was walking. I had to do the textures of the blood on the wall, and I spent, like, I don't know, like 3, 4 hours, painting a very detailed hand, and then it never got into the game. And I was like,
Mm,
oh, I see. This is not about me doing my work of art. I'm just doing assets to convey the message of the game. And once it stops being personal, I think and a lot of artists I worked with, like, I remember
mm,
the first artist I worked on 12 minutes, or even on The Witness. We would hire artists. I remember there was an artist we hired who had to work on like on all the Call of Duty games. He was very good at doing things, but very fast things. He had all these levels of, if you've played Call of Duty, you have this generic rubble. You do rocks that you place around. You do a bunch of stuff to fill the level. But on The Witness, no, no, no. Like you have to think 5 minutes on every single rock that you place. So he would get frustrated because half his work was getting to be redone over and over and over again. And it takes a toll on you creatively if you're attached to your work.
Yeah.
But if you let it go and you stop seeing yourself as, a prima donna that's putting a piece of art in a museum, but you're just doing things to get it someplace. I think it is detachment. You're not failing if the work you've done doesn't go into the game. It's just the iteration process that you need to go through to arrive at the thing that will stay there, right? You need to do a lot of work that goes thrown away. Pixar has a great philosophy on this. So let's just get all the shit out of the way really fast, and being comfortable doing that, over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think it must be hard. I think like anything creative, like I see it all the time. You naturally create a bond with anything you create. Exactly. I think we're programmed to do it. I think it's like it doesn't matter what it is. Yeah, because you've created it, and obviously like creativity and perspective and ideology, they're all kind of linked, right? When you're making something. And if the rest of the world doesn't perceive what you've made the same way you have, like, then all of a sudden you're like, well, that means they're attacking my perception.
Yeah, my ego is being attacked. I'm not worthy. Yeah. So this was a struggle I had. Like, once I was a lead, this was a constant. It was a constant of people who do beautiful pieces of art, but it doesn't fit the goal. Like this armor is too big for the character that moves so lightly, or the narrative we're trying to say doesn't fit the art you did. But we could not arrive at this conclusion if you hadn't done the work.
Yeah.
We needed to do this. We needed to see it. So we throw it away.
Embrace the failure, right? Which one? You worked with some pretty big actors and actresses, like Daisy Ridley, William Dafoe,
James
McAvoy. Yeah. What was that like?
It was great. I mean, they're extremely talented. Which there was a very technical, challenging aspect to recording the voices for the game, which was like turning these dynamic scripts into something linear for them. Being able, right? They could not memorize the script, it means they had to understand the characters and be kind of in the moment based on who the characters were, and then convey all these things through the dialogues while still respecting the gameplay and how the dialogues all attach to each other. But they were so talented that they could do all this and write and figure out the direction for the characters. It was great. They really helped elevate the game to a level that I didn't think we would be able to. And they liked the material, right? They were excited by the challenge of the material. And they were on the same page. Like the last thing I wanted was like Disney. I know they do this in some of their films where they storyboard the whole thing, and then the actors, they record by themselves, and they do this, let's say this line, happy, really happy, extremely happy, and then the editing, right, is gluing all these things together. But I wanted the actors to all act with each other. They would always bounce off each other, and they wanted to do the same thing. So we're pretty aligned in terms of the challenge of building the characters, which was super fun.
It's fascinating to see actors and actresses have to like you said, like do multiple lines of dialogue for the same instance, depending on what the player's done with that, because it's completely like abstract from your typical script in a film where it's like this linear journey from A to B. Yeah, I think it's brilliant.
And there's even more. Like I think in a film, and Willem mentioned this a couple of times, which was interesting. Like in a film, your body, the position of the camera, the lighting, you're doing a lot of other things. You have to take into account as an actor a lot of more variables. While in the soundstage, it's all in your voice. Like the only thing I'm going to get out of your performance is the voice. Yeah, there's this, for example, I remember with Willem character, right, you want to see a journey in the characters, even though it's just 12 minutes. And right, and I had an idea of how Willem characters should be. But once he impersonates the character, right, he could see that some things would flow better if his tonality was different. I hope you played 12 minutes?
Yeah.
Like there has to be a very clear distinction between the the cop as he arrives aggressive, the cop as he's handcuffed and he's afraid of
Mm,
dying, the father thing at the end, right? There were these beats of personality that had to be very distinct in a
mm,
subtle way, and they had to come all through the voice. And figuring these out was kind of their task as actors,
mm.
and they were very good at it. They were even answering questions that I didn't know existed.
Do you think this will continue to grow? Because this is a fantastic example of film and game combining creatively. And recently we had on Abubakar Salim. He's one of the leads in Ridley Scott's Raised by Wolves. He plays father. He's now still doing that role, and he's actually created his own game studio with EA, and he's working on his own because he's always wanted to make games, and he's trying to focus on things differently narratively. And again, 12 Minutes is a fantastic example of, we're seeing it more and more in games, but this is almost like an indie project where actors and actresses have got involved, and you don't really ever see that, right?
No,
Like
it's true.
it's very, very unique, and it's do you think this could lead to more, like, how do you think this will evolve, this like film game collaboration?
First, I think games, they're making a lot of money, right? As a
Mm,
medium. And I think that's making people no longer look at them as entertainment. That's one of them. The other one is, right, there's this like Annapurna Interactive, right? Who I partner with. They have a feed on each side. Our meetings would be at Annapurna Studios in LA, where you don't see any differentiation between games and films. The whole thing is all, it's creative people trying to do projects. And I think projects have, like technology with Unity and Unreal and all these engines, we've reached a level where like iPhones, like everyone can be a photographer now, where which
mm.
allows a lot of creative projects made by few people to have a level
Mm,
of quality that, yeah, like indie movies in a way, like A24 doing their things. I think you can do productions of a certain quality that yeah, that actors look at them and it's not, just a dude in his basement doing Pac-Man and he wants my voice, versus he's actually trying to do something that
mm,
will hopefully break some boundaries or get somewhere, and they think they
mm.
might be able to participate in that and bring something to it more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in 12 minutes, like we could do mocap. We had this talented sound. The composer, I was amazed at, like the libraries of sound you have now where you can digitally recreate, orchestra instruments. And
Mm.
but there's no orchestra, it's just a dude in his home with a MIDI player and a lot of knowledge about classical music building this. I think we're at this level where, yeah, things are more professional in a way, I think, and people want to be part of it and see where it goes. It's no longer seen as
Yeah.
fast food, I think.
It's interesting how games, and I suppose being a geek in general, has has lost that label.
Yeah,
And now, I mean, like, obviously, it's bigger than film and music combined in terms of the amount of money that it earns, and the size of game is obviously ridiculously big. But I think game will become, the term games is going to become broader and
yeah,
broader
it will be
as we like
interactive
5, 10 years.
entertainment, I think. Yeah,
Mm,
because it's true. There's a big stigma towards games. Like my wife doesn't
mm.
play games. My wife is like, games are a waste of time. It's
Yes,
I'm like,
my girlfriend's exactly the same. She
like
calls it wizards. I'm like,
like you wouldn't say that about a book. Like who would say that books are a waste of time, right?
yeah.
But some books are a waste of time. But the whole
Yeah.
throwing away the whole medium, and I think there's
Mm,
this, yeah, there's this huge connotation of games, and I think it's because of the word, because games themselves, I think, are a form of entertainment foremost. But I think
mm,
the interactive medium, where there's this dialogue between you and whatever you're experiencing, is much richer than just, Scrabble or Bejeweled or Pac-Man or
mm.
Tetris. I mean, we've seen it over and over now.
I think it no longer has to prove itself to get a bigger audience or try and aim to get a bigger audience. I think it's going to be one of those that people are naturally going to adopt it
Yeah,
as it evolves. And I love that. I think 12 minutes is a very good example of like just basically the success and the growth and the interest in games.
I think we were able to get this cast in the game because I think we've reached that momentum where they won't dismiss the game. And I remember, like as a AAA, I remember very well, we like Rockstar and Ubisoft, that you would get a big actor, pay him big bucks, so his voice is there, so you can put the name on the label, without actually
Mm,
being like, will they actually be able to provide something that enriches the game? But I think now that's
mm,
what happens, right? I genuinely believe that the actors we got, like that's how we did it. We showed them the material. I spoke with them telling them my goals, and they were like, "This looks cool. I want to be part of this." Which I think
Mm,
5 years ago would be much harder unless you give them big
yeah.
bags of money and you're a big publisher. And
Yeah, it is. But I think that's because naturally they'll have like relatives and friends who will be playing
yeah,
games,
you're
and
right.
that natural association is like, actually, yeah, this is like a cool thing to do now because like I might have a niece or a nephew who's played like I don't know, often it's like something like Fortnite, but like it's like an introduction, like Fortnite and games like Fortnite. People can be quite derogative about them when you're working within the industry, but they're a gateway to the industry for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, I mean,
And I
and phone games, mobile games, it's everywhere. Like you
Yeah,
cannot
yeah.
ignore that games are a daily presence.
With your career, like it really does show that it is possible to create a game from like an artistic background. You come into the industry, obviously you did design at uni, your inception into the industry and for a couple of roles thereafter is very much about art. You don't see often like artists going on to create games even if they want to. What do you think the current blockers to that are? And like, would you have any advice to people listening if you're working in art or animation, how you can actually then go into game design?
I think the biggest blocker is programming. Programming, learning to program is pretty hard.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say hard, it's very relative because, like, when I learned 3D, I would have to buy a book. I remember buying a big book of Studio Max and I installed the program, and you're like, I remember I pressed F, which I think locks the pivot, and then for 5 days I'm trying to find out why the pivot is locked. I cannot go Google pivot is locked. There's no one in the internet talks about this. The book doesn't talk about this.
Yeah.
And nowadays for programming, you have a million courses, a million tutorials.
Mm.
So I think hard is not that hard. It's just, but I think it's learning how to program. Learning how to program is learning a new language. Literally, is learning how to speak again. And I think you need to be very passionate to put the
Yeah.
effort of learning how to speak again from scratch. But I think you
Mm.
need to know that to do a game, because game design is programming. They're completely connected to each other. You're writing code to make things happen, and it has to be, there's all this understanding that needs to happen to make a game. And I think we artists have a more visual mindset of doing things, and suddenly you're writing lines of code, and there was a lot of struggles, a lot of, I don't know how I went through a lot of it, and how functions work, how variables work with each other, and all the errors you get. They're so obscure, just it's horrible. It's horrible. I think
Oh,
that's the
jeez.
biggest struggle is
Yeah.
for
It
programming.
doesn't sound very enticing.
But it is. It's super fun. Like, it's the moment you have something moving on the screen, like the moment you can call a
Mm.
friend and you press the space bar and the thing changes color. The thing with programming is like that you feel you're the king of the world, you know,
Mm.
and 5 minutes later you know nothing. You suck at it. You'll never get anywhere. Like in 12 minutes, for example, there was a, like, when the cop arrests you, he throws you on the floor. But the space is very small, so the cop needs to know what are the available spaces to drop the body of the character. And so suddenly, this thing that's very simple was a huge problem. How do I calculate the available space to drop a body on the floor? And then, if you already dropped one character on the floor, he has to take into account the spaces that are left. So I would spend months on these. I'm like, dude, I don't want to think about this. I want to think about the
Mm.
story. But no, for the next 3 4 months, you're thinking how to drop a body on the floor without hitting the furniture, or programming is this all the time, which is also another lesson. When you ask about lessons, I think that's a big one, where I did all the programming for the game, like, or 90%. I didn't do the ports, I didn't do some small things, but I was doing the whole code, and I would delegate a lot more. Now I know how to delegate because I understand how code works and how you can section things off. This I could have hired someone to be like, you're going to solve dropping the character on the floor. But when I worked, the dropping was very connected, and it was all entangled as a spaghetti. That's a big lesson, right? You should, like, a big lesson is, once you've done your prototype, you should rewrite the whole code from scratch, so you don't redo the mistakes of the prototype, which I didn't do. It's a steep curve, a painful steep curve that you need to go through, but once you've gone through, it's beautiful. Yeah.
It feels like you can just, like you said earlier, like, with like a designer, it's like having an artist who can't draw. but they can paint. It's like once you learn programming, you can then connect your art with your programming, with your game design. It kind of completes that ecosystem.
Kind of, because like as an artist, like I remember I was doing a monster creature years ago, and you're doing the scales, right? You're doing the scales, or even a face. You're modeling the pores or whatever, and you put a nice song or you put a podcast, and you get into the zone, and you're modeling. There's no getting into the zone in programming. You have to be 100% super focused writing the code, and that aspect of it. There's an art side of things that you just flow when you're drawing, when you're
Mm,
painting. That you just, if you're coloring something, you're if you're painting wood, you're just doing the wood, and it might be 2 hours. Or if you're tracing a drawing. In programming, you
mm,
never really, I never experienced that. Like, imagine I finished solving the guy dropping the character on the floor. Now I'm gonna have to
mm.
solve the feet not sliding when you go from walking to turning, and there's no,
Cheers.
yeah, there's no stopping there. I think there's a big,
Yeah.
it's like you're developing new muscles. Like programming, you have to put all the problem in your head to
Mm,
finally start thinking about it. And just uploading the problem you're trying to solve, all the variables takes like 40 minutes. And then if
mm.
someone opens the door, hey, are you hungry? All gone, you know?
It's all gone.
You haven't even started
Yeah.
thinking about the solution.
Yeah.
And that is hard, man. That it hasn't stopped being hard for me.
It
It's
sounds very rewarding, but to get to that point, it sounds like you have to graft and you have to, like you said, passion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But there is, like,
Yeah.
I have to say, for people who listen to this and get demotivated, there is a moment like when 12 minutes started, every character was like a box. Like the husband was, I mean, it's the colors I ended up with the dialogues. The husband was like white, the cop was blue, the wife was pink. And right, they went from boxes to these modeled characters. Suddenly they were animating. And there was a moment that anyone playing the game, they would put so much meaning into what is being rendered on the screen that they cared for the characters, right? And I'm like,
Mm,
there's no characters. This is just 3D models being rendered in a screen, but suddenly you're connecting with this. And this transition, being the creator of this transition and seeing people, for example, a lot of people who play the game, they never stab the wife because they care about
mm,
it. And you're like, you're caring about something that does not exist. The moment these things start to be there, that you start seeing that they're alive and you believe they exist, it's very magical. Games have this, like animation, you see this too. People drawing on paper, suddenly you see these frames passing and it's alive. But no, it's just
yeah.
drawings on paper, I think. And in games, there's this level of interactiveness that it's magical.
That's the moral of the story. What's next for you?
I have an idea that I think it's really cool. It's just on paper still. I just started to prototype like a week or two ago. This could be a total other podcast, but there was a big personal development thing that happened to me during this game was learning how to be in the present moment, realizing that we're always in our thoughts, right? And our thoughts are
Mm,
all about evaluating what happened in our past, and we use our past to predict the future, right? And the more we're stuck in our past, the more we have this guilt and regrets, and the more we think about our future, there's all this anxiety and but the only thing that exists is the present moment, right? There's nothing else. There's literally
mm,
nothing else but the now. And this realization, like especially 12 minutes the last year, where it was like, when is it out? When are you done? I'm like, I have to enjoy the journey, what we were talking about early. So there's this process of what I want to do next in terms of games, like how am I going to get the funding, building the team. I want to build something that is sustainable for everyone that I'm going to be working with. But there's also, and I think the pandemic did a lot of this to a lot of people, there's this process of appreciating life, and seeing
mm,
how I can do that process. And the game did well financially, so I have some room to figure those things out. I'm not rushed into I need to start doing a game right now to have food on the table, so I can figure these things out. So it's a bit of both. It's this personal journey, like how many hours should I work? A lot of indie developers at GDC, we all meet up and we talk about these things. Like in 12 minutes, for example, I would have a list of tasks I need to do. But was
mm,
I productive? How do I measure productiveness when I'm the only one measuring myself? And there's this constant feeling of I'm not fast enough, I'm not producing enough. There's all these measures we put on ourselves that are not good for your health, and for your
Mm.
enjoyment of the present moment. So I'm trying to question all these and balance all these, especially out with the family and everything. And instead of going straight into a project and suddenly, there's 10 people working and we're in a schedule and we're trying to produce and it all gets lost. So there's a lot of introspection going on at the moment.
Yeah,
I have,
but that's great.
and there's also something like, this is cool because the first interview I'm doing since all these things have come to light of, like, I have one idea that I think it's amazing narratively and it's an evolution. Like 12 minutes, I think was successful in merging storytelling and gameplay all the time, right? You don't have a cutscene of
Mm.
exposition and then you're playing the game. It's all merged. It's all happening. It's all
Mm.
nonstop. And I think I like that a lot. A lot of games still have this level structure where you get your objectives and you go do your level and you collect these things and then you
Mm.
go to 12 minutes. There's none of that. And I like that a lot. I think it makes it more interactive, it's more intense. And I have an idea
Mm.
that builds on that I really want to do. But on the other hand, I have another idea that has nothing to do with that I really like, but I don't know if it will be financially viable because I think I'm the only one who likes it. But I'm like, is
Oh.
there room to build those things, to create
Mm.
something that, like, I don't know if you played Exo 1. What are the games?
Mm.
There's few games like this. Did you play Shadow of the Colossus?
Yeah, loved it. Shadow Colossus is
Yeah,
amazing
like,
because there's such an emotional tie to the things you're killing,
exactly.
right? Like,
But
yeah.
even that, it's so in me that, like, when you would be walking towards the Colossus and raising the sword to get the light, there's this thing that you feel about it. And you're just riding
Mm.
the horse towards the location. And I think more and more games are exploring that thing
Yeah.
that is nothing but it's everything. And I want to explore that. But it's very hard to put that into gameplay, right? It's a very distilled thing. But to explore it, you cannot be constrained. You cannot be thinking about budgets and time and schedules
Mm.
and are players going to be engaged? You don't know. And I want to see, can I
Mm.
explore that and still, have money to for food and rent?
It goes full circle, logistics versus creativity. Because there's so many things we could touch on about what you just said. The thing with Shadow of the Colossus, what makes it so brilliant is it's so desolate. And the fact that it's only you, I can't remember the horse's name, and the Colossi, that's it. But you're killing them I think it's to save the woman who's sick, the princess who's sick, if I remember
Yeah, but it's
correctly.
all very vague.
Um,
It's all very,
but that's what's so brilliant. So you have to use your imagination. You have to fill in the gaps, and like the Dark Souls games do this well, where the story is so abstract that like you're filling in the gaps. But it's for me. Well, for me, I don't know. Obviously, just speak from my perspective, like playing games, but it's emotion, right? Like I need to have emotional triggers, and like when you hold the sword up and you get the light and it guides you. I think you're filled with purpose, but a bit of guilt almost because you're on to kill the next one and everything is emotionally resonant. It
yeah, yeah,
resonates with you.
yeah. And you want to kill it because it's fun, and you
Yeah,
climb
yeah.
them and
This
they're
is.
majestic. But I think the process to arrive at that, it's a
Mm.
very long, iterative. There's a lot of things you're gonna throw away over. Like, I don't know if you read the making of Shadow
Mm.
of the Colossus. There's a long road to walk that
Mm.
you want it to be as pleasurable as possible, so you enjoy doing it. And I think I've been
Mm.
thinking a lot about how to achieve that,
Mm.
how to do that, how to do that process and still enjoy life.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because sustainability comes from creating something for in games for a predetermined demographic where they're going to pay for it.
Yeah, exactly.
However, creativity comes from taking a risk because there is no predetermined audience who's actually going to be like. That's why big AAA publishers stick with the same IP like FIFA because they know they're going to sell a similar number of copies every year, and that's that sustainability.
FIFA, I see it more as it's a different kind of game. Like, what you're saying, I would say more like Assassin's Creed, where you have collectibles and
Mm,
the XP and then where they have this formula and you build on the
mm.
formula.
Chatting to a colleague this morning about exactly this point. We're talking about MMOs actually. You look at World of Warcraft's like 15 years old, and yet every MMO since has copied that archetype as this is how you should make MMOs. But in fact, everyone's 15 years older who used to play it, right? Like they have less time, and it's like, why should that be how you
Oh
should
yeah,
interact?
oh yeah. I mean, that drives me nuts actually. Like, I remember, like, at Ubisoft, we would help students at school. They were doing their projects, and especially with
Mm,
students, you see this. They love games because there's some games they played that really touch them. So they start a game and they're like, okay, this is character. He goes left to right and he jumps. I'm like, well, why does he go left to right? Why are there platforms, right? And yeah, a lot of game design, you still see like great ideas. Like the concept is great, but then you make a platformer. You make whatever it is that you were comfortable with instead
That's
of
yeah,
questioning those decisions. But they're so passionate about what they play that they don't, yeah, like what you said about the MMO. And I think that is like, I've
yeah.
seen a lot of games like God of War. I got a PlayStation to play. Red Dead Redemption, loved it. Spider-Man, loved it. Then I was going to play God of War. I never played a God of War game because I never had a PlayStation before. And you have this amazing opening. Did you play the God of War? The last?
Yeah, it's probably my favorite like game of last gen.
So you're not gonna like what I'm gonna say. But look, my point of view comes from the Shadow of the Colossus point of view. So I was
Yeah.
that amazing opening cinematic. Like I was emotional. I was like, I'm feeling it. Then the level starts. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Guys spawn. Orbs come out. Like what? Dream energy bars. I'm like, what? Wait,
Yeah.
I was in this story. Why do I have energy bars? Why do I have levels? Why? I mean, the mechanics are great. The hammer throwing, coming back, it was like a Thor thing. It was really solid. But was this dissonance between this story you're telling in your cutscenes and me killing. I don't know how many people you kill in that game, right? You're slaughtering machine over and
That's a lot of people, man.
I'm like,
it's a bit.
There's a disconnect. It's a Super Mario with a very deep story, you know?
Yeah. See, for me, it's the story. Like, so I played all the originals. It's one of my like favorite franchise. And you're completely right, though. The gameplay is the same objective-based gameplay that we see in probably 90% of games. But for me, it's the narrative. That's why I loved it. But then on the flip side of that, I'd say the other game that I absolutely loved was Hades. Like, I thought Hades was
I gotta
absolutely
play that
brilliant. I
game.
don't know if you.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's so good. And but the whole point of Hades is to have the same gameplay loop. But because it's obviously it's a roguelike, because that's what they do, you accept it for what it is because it's been created with that in mind. Oh, I can talk about this forever. I do worry about innovation and budget and innovation and stability, should I say, because I feel like at the moment in the games industry, they contradict one another. There's a fear of innovating in case you don't make money. And so the question is then who innovates? And often it's the indies who have to now carry that. It's almost impossible to innovate at a sustainable scale.
I think like in fashion, it's the same. You have the fashion designers who make those clothes that no one will wear, but a distilled version of that will be in H&M in a year, right? They're doing these clothes that have this innovation in the design, and then someone filters them so you can wear it in the street. And I think it's the same. Like the indies come up with amazing mechanic, and then 3 years later or 4, you have a AAA that borrows that mechanic into this bigger scale thing because they're like, this was super fun, everyone loved it, we're definitely gonna use it. I think it's
with the being in the present, like I completely agree with that, like analyzing. Do you know what the problem is with self-analyzing? Because I do like CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy and things like this, and I've done like mindfulness, and it's naturally like everybody accepts rationale if it's negative. Unfortunately, like we've been programmed almost to do that, like in the way that we shouldn't be like that. So if you're overanalyzing, people often overanalyze until they get to a negative conclusion and then they accept that and move on. And that shouldn't be the way at all. But you accept a negative conclusion because it's easier to live with than a positive one. I think that's why often people blame themselves for situations which aren't actually their fault because they've overanalyzed it to the point where they're like, I need to accept responsibility to move on, even if it's not theirs. That's just my,
I mean, look, we could talk about this for hours because when we go into that, like I think the concept of fault is already an issue, right? We live in a society where we blame others. There's this comfort. Oh, this happened. Your fault. Done. Solved. Now it boils down to the idea of blaming others for how we feel, right? Instead of you being responsible for your emotions, we've learned to judge and blame others for a situation. Like for example, I always give this example. Imagine you have a meeting and someone is late for the meeting and you get all pissed, because you're hungry, you want to eat, you're tired, and this guy comes late. So you blame him for how you feel. You come late always the same thing. But it could happen that you're not ready for the meeting and the guy being late is amazing, right? You have time to prepare for the meeting and now you're happy that he's late, right? And if you look at the situation, right, the guy being late was just a stimulus, but the way you interpret the situation first there's this, you felt something and you decided to blame the other for how you felt, instead of actually realizing that you're hungry, and it's the hunger that makes you not want to be in the meat. But maybe you could go eat and come back, or it stops you from being able to really understand the situation the moment you start blaming. Yeah, like, but the thing is, your brain does this. Your brain starts to process to understand, why am I feeling uncomfortable? It's you because you're late for the meeting. Instead of being, no, I have a need for food because I'm hungry. So what I want is food. So I could tell the other guy, look, you're a bit late. Would you be willing with delay 10 more minutes so I get a sandwich? No. You're like, you're always late. No. Yeah.
I've got actually one last question, and then I will let you go.
Yeah.
How would you summarize your career in one sentence? What would it be? What would it say?
In one sentence? Oh man, that's a super hard question. Refreshing. I think it's the word is, it's very refreshing. Every single project is new. Like, I went from a stealth violent shooter to a racing game to a theater game. Everything is new. It's very refreshing. Like, I never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Like, right now I have no idea. Like, we want to move to another country, no idea where we're going to move, when I want to open a studio, where I'm going to work. I love that. I'm so lost. It's very refreshing. Yeah.
Brilliant. No, that's fantastic. Louis, you've obviously been, it's been such a pleasure.
Same here.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I can't wait to see what's next. I do have to say a little disclaimer, like, obviously all the views that you've heard here today are those of Luis and my own. They do not represent our employers in any shape.
Definitely not.
And if you'd like to reach out to us, you can at gamedevshow@ptw.com. Luis, thank you so much. Hopefully see your next project soon, or maybe in 5 years, but I cannot wait. And thank you, Luke. Thanks for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was great.
Brilliant. Take care.
Game over.